Hey guys, tonight we dig deep, literally, into the mud, grime, and unappetizing mystery of World War II soldier food. You're crouched low in a damp foxhole, boots soaked, stomach growling, and in your trembling hand is a rectangular cardboard box. It's not a gift, it's not lunch, it's a K-ration. You pry it open like you're unwrapping something sacred, only to find cheese spread that hasn't known a cow in years, a sugar cookie that could break a tooth, and, of course, one lonely stick of chewing gum to chase the existential despair. The wind howls just above your helmet, and you're reminded this is your dinner, breakfast, and lunch, depending on when the shelling stops. And you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Are you in bed, on a couch, under a pile of warm cats? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squat in the muck, K-ration on your lap, watching steam curl off a neighbor's tepid coffee can. The contents of your box are designed by nutritionists, not chefs. The goal? Keep you alive. Barely. The standard K-ration, introduced in 1942, came in 3 boxes: breakfast, dinner, and supper. But don't get excited. The variety between them is more like which flavor of despair you'll experience. Crackers, cheese, processed meats, powdered beverage packets, a smattering of hard candy, and sometimes, if fate is feeling generous, a fruit bar that tastes like sadness and nostalgia. The U.S. Army knew the importance of calories, and the K-ration delivered about 2,800 of them a day. That's decent energy for a desk job, but you're marching 20 miles in mud while dodging bullets. Not great math. And yet, it was considered a luxury compared to what soldiers got in earlier wars. During World War I, rations were heavier, bulkier, and even more primitive. Imagine carrying a 10-pound tin just to get beans that tasted last year's basement. World War II tried to be smarter: lighter packaging, pre-portioned meals, and mass production. Unfortunately, smarter didn't mean tastier. As you chew, scratch that, gnaw on a hard biscuit, you remember this rations box has a companion, the can opener. It's a tiny, stamped metal piece of wizardry called the P-38. Soldiers called it the Army's best invention because it did more than open cans. It was a screwdriver, a scraper, a fingernail destroyer. If MacGyver were a private in 1944, this was his Excalibur. Historians still argue whether the K-ration was truly revolutionary or just the least bad option available. Some say it was a triumph of logistics: lightweight, calorie-dense, and easy to mass-produce. Others point out it caused weight loss, vitamin deficiencies, and psychological warfare via the taste buds. A typical morning meal for you, assuming you get to eat in the morning, is a tin of chopped ham and eggs. It tastes like something between sawdust and regret. There's a packet of instant coffee, which you try to brew using water from your canteen and a tin helmet that still smells like last week's rain. The gum? That's dessert, because life is comedy when your finest course is spearmint. Some boxes contained canned fruit. You whisper a small prayer when you see peaches. They're the holy grail of rations. Slippery, sweet, and just enough to remind you there's a world with real food in it. One soldier once wrote home, saying he would marry anyone who sent him more peaches. True love, defined by syrup. Quirky fact: some rations included a toilet paper square. Yes, singular. As if they knew what the cheese spread was going to do to your intestines. It came lovingly tucked next to a book of matches and a tiny packet of salt. You begin to wonder if this ration is secretly an escape room puzzle: how to make a meal out of dehydrated dust and 2 sticks of gum. But food isn't just calories, it's morale. Soldiers used to open their rations and swap with each other like Pokemon cards. I'll give you my caramels for your peanut butter. The peanut butter, by the way, was famously oily, separated, and came in a can. You had to stir it with something, often a bayonet, a stick, or, if you were fancy, a spoon. That is, if the spoon hadn't already been lost in the mud or used to dig a foxhole. The psychological aspect of food can't be overstated. You're far from home. You're cold, scared, and tired. The one bright spot of the day is the moment you get to pretend you're eating something familiar. But instead, you find a meat paste. You're trudging through a thick European forest, branches clawing at your face, mud sucking at your boots. Somewhere behind you, artillery rumbles like a distant thunderstorm. Your stomach grumbles, not from hunger, but from frustration. How did you end up eating the same dehydrated slop day after day? You reach into your pack and pull out a small tin, the emblem barely visible, C ration. It's the Army's version of a TV dinner, though with less charm and far more mystery. The C ration was designed to feed a soldier for one full day, typically in 3 meals, each packed in a metal can with a pull-tab lid. Unlike the K ration's cardboard boxes, the C ration was heavy, bulky, and a bit like carrying a mini junkyard in your backpack. Yet for all its hat, it promised a more substantial meal, at least on paper. Inside, you might find canned meat, sometimes called loaf, beans, stew, or even canned cheese spread. The menus were surprisingly varied, though that didn't always translate to deliciousness. One infamous variant was the ham and lima beans. Sounds promising, right? Wrong. The beans were mushy, the ham rubbery, and the whole thing tasted like it had been left out during a rainstorm. Soldiers joked that it could double as a hand warmer because it was guaranteed to warm you up from the inside out, whether you wanted it to or not. Now, here's the quirky bit. The cans came with a little accessory called a P38 can opener, the same mini tool you've been using for your K rations. It's a tiny metal wonder, just a couple of inches long, but it could open those stubborn metal lids faster than any knife or bayonet. They say every GI carried one. It was like a Swiss Army knife's much less glamorous cousin. Not particularly fancy, but it got the job done. Opening a C ration can was a ritual in itself. You'd brace yourself against a tree, grip the opener, and twist the lid back and forth, praying the sharp edge wouldn't slip and carve a new battle wound into your hand. Then, once the lid was off, you'd peer in, trying to identify the food inside without gagging. Sometimes it was a chunky stew, other times a homogeneous brown paste. But it was food, and that was what mattered. Historians still argue whether the C ration was a logistical marvel or just a necessary evil. It was heavy, bulky, and often unappetizing, but it got soldiers through grueling campaigns across Europe, the Pacific, and North Africa. The sheer scale of production, millions of these cans shipped worldwide, was staggering. And despite the complaints, soldiers often found comfort in the predictability of the meals. One soldier's diary entry captures it perfectly. The cans may not taste like Grandma's cooking, but they keep me alive, and when you're out here, alive is the only thing that matters. Another odd fact, C rations sometimes included a candy bar or chewing gum, which were highly prized commodities. Soldiers would trade or hoard these little sugar boosts like treasure. The gum in particular was seen as a luxury, a way to freshen breath, relieve boredom, or just have something to do with your mouth when the food was less than exciting. But there was a surprising innovation hidden in these cans, the canned bread. That's right, bread inside a tin. It was dense, dry, and rather unappetizing, but it existed. Imagine a loaf that doesn't crumble, but instead holds together like a brick. You could slice it with a knife, but most soldiers just tore chunks off, often smearing them with the cheese spread or whatever else was available. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some soldiers reported that the canned bread tasted better if you heated it on a radiator or near an engine exhaust pipe. The warmth softened it and brought out some kind of faint sweetness. Others insisted it was better eaten cold, mostly because it didn't fall apart that way. And speaking of cheese spread, it made a triumphant return in the C ration. The same orange, gluey paste from the K ration, it was the dietary equivalent of a practical joke. Spread on canned bread or crackers, it was both a source of calories and comic relief. Soldiers joked that it could fix a broken boot or patch a leaky tent. Another curiosity was the dessert unit. Yes, dessert. It often came in the form of a fruit bar or a tiny can of pudding, usually chocolate or vanilla flavored. It wasn't gourmet, but it was sweetness in a world otherwise dominated by salt and powder. When you sit down to eat your sea ration, it's a strange blend of practicality and ritual. You're grateful for the nourishment, but acutely aware of the gap between this and real food. Still, the shared experience creates bonds. Soldiers compare notes on which menus are tolerable, which cans are suspicious, and which ones might just be weapons in disguise. In the end, the sea ration is more than food. It's a symbol of wartime ingenuity, logistical muscle, and the gritty reality of feeding millions of men in the middle of a global conflict. And as you scrape the last bits of meat, you wake up stiff, cold, and with a stiff neck from sleeping in a foxhole that would make a raccoon feel claustrophobic. The sun is just a faint suggestion on the horizon, and already your stomach is grumbling like a malfunctioning tank engine. Time for another gourmet day in the life of a World War II soldier. 3 square meals that are anything but square, and often barely even meals. You fish around your pack for the breakfast portion of your ration, though let's not pretend there's an actual schedule here. Food comes when the sergeant says it does, or when there's a lull in the chaos, or sometimes not at all. The days blur together, so the difference between breakfast, lunch, and dinner is mostly semantic. But let's try to play along. You crack open the breakfast unit of your K-ration. Inside, canned chopped ham and eggs, some dry biscuits that taste like seasoned drywall, a packet of Nescafe instant coffee, 4 sugar cubes, a fruit bar, and the ever-dependable chewing gum. Oh, and don't forget the 1 square of toilet paper, gently folded as if that somehow makes it dignified. You pop the lid off the canned eggs. A faint hiss escapes, like the food itself is sighing. You heat it over a small fire, maybe using a few twigs, or, if you're lucky, a solid fuel tablet from a friend in supply. After 5 minutes, the eggs are warm, which helps soften their rubbery texture. You eat it straight from the can, and each bite is a mix of protein, salt, and deep existential reflection. Then comes the coffee. Pour water into your canteen cup, drop in the powder, and stir with whatever isn't covered in mud or blood. It's gritty, strong, and vaguely tastes like a burnt library. But it's hot, it's caffeinated, it's magic. By mid-morning, you're on the move again, marching, sweating, shivering, ducking. Lunchtime sneaks up without fanfare. If you're lucky, you get a moment to squat behind a half-blown wall and open the dinner unit. This one includes a cheese spread tin, more dry crackers, aka teeth testers, a canned meat product, maybe pork luncheon meat or beef and pork loaf, powdered lemonade, and another fruit bar. You smear the cheese on the crackers. It resists the knife, clinging to the tin like a stubborn toddler. The texture is part glue, part jelly, and part cheese in theory. But on the battlefield, you're not picky. You chew slowly, partly to prolong the illusion of fullness, partly because it physically takes that long. The lemonade? A miracle. Pour the powder into your canteen, shake it, and sip carefully. It's tart, sweet, and for a brief second, you're not at war. You're at a picnic. A weird, slightly metallic picnic, but still. Later, as evening falls and the air turns sharp, you find a moment for supper. This one is a toss-up. Maybe you get a can of meat stew with vegetables. The label makes promises it can't quite keep. You open it and peer inside. A brownish sludge with unidentifiable chunks, the kind of thing that looks like it was cooked by a blindfolded raccoon with a grudge. You warm it over a flame, mostly for texture. It always tastes the same, hot or cold, aggressively bland. The crackers come back, of course, like culinary Groundhog Day. You eat them out of obligation more than enjoyment. Occasionally, there's a chocolate bar, usually the D-ration type. It's not sweet, it's not melty, it's not fun. Designed to not be a luxury item, this bar is essentially a block of compressed survival. Soldiers often used it more as a bargaining chip than a treat. At night, the last thing you consume might be a stick of gum. The same flavor every time. Spearmint. A tiny, chewy relic of normalcy. It's just enough to scrape the canned meat taste off your molars before you lie down on cold dirt and hope the next ration box brings slightly less suffering. Here's a quirky fact. The daily ration was supposed to be rotated. K ration for short bursts, C ration for longer durations, and A ration, actual cooked meals, for rear areas. But supply chains weren't so tidy. Frontline troops often lived on the same type of ration for weeks. One poor guy reportedly ate the same meat and beans tin for 12 days straight and started calling it meat and regret. Historians still argue whether the Army's food strategy reflected logistical genius or just a profound underestimation of what human taste buds can endure. The design of these meals prioritized portability, durability, and calorie count, but left palatability somewhere near the bottom of the list. Possibly below can also be used as building material. Yet the rhythm of ration life becomes part of you. Open tin, stir powder, chew slowly, joke grimly, barter with chocolate. It's all weirdly comforting, a strange ritual in a world where nothing else makes sense. Your stomach groans again, not out of hunger this time, but confusion, because what you just put in your mouth might have been meat, or it might have been a dare. This is what it's like to open up your next ration box, the one marked with the simple, ominous words, meat product. You stare at it like it might blink first. Inside, nestled in a sad little metal can, is something that vaguely resembles ground beef, or maybe cat food that passed through an existential crisis. Welcome to the world of mystery meat and powdered eggs, the culinary heart and soulless soul of World War II soldier food. You slide your P-38 under the lid and twist. It squeals open with the sound of ancient regret. Instantly, you're hit with a smell that's somehow greasy and metallic at the same time. You spoon some into your mouth. It's salty, mushy, and clings to your molars like it's applying for citizenship. Some soldiers swore it was Spam. Others were certain it was a failed science experiment from the 1930s. Historians still argue whether the U.S. meat rations were primarily pork, beef, or some uncanny valley in between. The powdered eggs, meanwhile, are their own level of edible confusion. They come in a beige packet, looking like someone crushed a sidewalk chalk factory. You pour the contents into a canteen cup, add water, stir with a stick, and heat it over a flame. The result is a steaming yellowish blob with the texture of wet foam and the scent of burnt ambition. And yet, you eat it, not because it's good, but because it's warm. Warmth matters out here. It's one of the few comforts the front line offers. Powdered eggs, in all their rubbery resilience, at least remind you of home breakfasts, if you ignore the fact that they squeak when chewed. Back in the rear, the field kitchens have slightly better tools. They use large vats to rehydrate powdered eggs for whole platoons. It's a strange sight. A metal tub full of fluffy, artificially yellow eggs stirred with something that looks like an ore. They plate it with toast if they have it. You don't. Curiously, despite their unpopularity, these powdered eggs had a following. Some soldiers called them gold dust when they were hot and properly cooked. Others thought they tasted like regret and gym mats. The divide was sharp, a culinary civil war, if you will. But that wasn't the only powdered oddity in your meal kit. Powdered milk was also a staple. And no, it doesn't taste like milk. It tastes like the idea of milk, passed down through 6 generations of telephone game. You mix it with water, shake it, sip it, and try not to cry. The texture is gritty, like drinking nostalgia laced with sand. Even the cows would disown it. Yet all these powdered and canned concoctions served a critical purpose: shelf life. Food had to be stored in every environment imaginable, from snow-packed forests to humid Pacific islands to sweltering deserts. The enemy wasn't just the Axis powers, it was spoilage, rot, bacteria, and honestly, boredom. Quirky side note, in some early U.S. rations, the meat was labeled with vague codes like Meat Unit 1 or Meat and Beans Type C. Some soldiers speculated this was done to keep morale up by not telling them what they were eating. One joke that went around said the mystery meat was whatever didn't make the draft. And then there's the cheese spread, a bright orange paste in a tiny can that looked cheerful enough until you opened it. It had the consistency of lip balm and the flavor of betrayal. Still, if you paired it with those impossibly hard crackers, it passed as food. Barely. Soldiers learned to spread it on anything. Bread if you had it, biscuits, your boot if it came to that, anything to soften the blow. Canned vegetables, when available, weren't much better. Canned spinach was especially infamous. It came out a swampy green, wilted into an unidentifiable mass. One GI wrote in his diary that it looked like something that lost a fight with a lawnmower. Another tried to barter his entire dessert ration just to avoid it. And speaking of desserts, enter the fruit bar. It's shaped like a granola bar, but chewier or stickier or both. It's made of fruit pulp, sugar, and something the army probably didn't have to disclose. It sticks to your teeth like caramelized guilt. But it's sweet, and when the world around you is exploding, sweet matters. One curious inclusion in some rations was canned pudding. Not the creamy dessert you're dreaming of, but a thick brown lump that smelled faintly of chocolate and strongly of resignation. Still, it was a hit. Anything even slightly dessert adjacent was a small miracle. There's also a can labeled beef and vegetables. Sounds decent, right? You open it to find a stew of sorts. Tiny rubbery meat cubes, potatoes boiled into oblivion, carrots that surrendered years ago. You're slogging through a sticky jungle swamp somewhere in the Pacific, sweat dripping into your eyes, boots squelching in mud that seems bottomless. You reach for your ration, but this time it's different, lighter, less bulky. It's the famed K ration, designed for short bursts of combat and easy to carry. A little cardboard box packed with surprises, or as close to surprises as wartime military food can get. Inside, you find 3 small meal packs: breakfast, lunch, and supper. Each has an array of items, a mix of canned meat, biscuits, chewing gum, chocolate, and powdered drink mixes. It's all neat, compact, and decidedly less cumbersome than the tin-laden C rations. But does that make it better? The answer is a complicated maybe. The K ration was invented by a doctor named Ansel Keys, a guy who later gained fame for his research into diet and health. But back then, his focus was purely practical. Create a ration that was lightweight, durable, and enough to keep a soldier fighting for 24 hours. The design was brilliant in concept, but reality was, as always, a bit messier. You open the breakfast pack first. Inside, a can of powdered eggs, a packet of powdered milk, dry biscuits, and instant coffee powder. You mix the eggs with water, stir, and heat over a small flame or even a cigarette lighter. The result is that familiar rubbery egg paste you've come to accept as part of your identity. The biscuits are dense and bland, perfect for scraping any lingering taste of mystery meat from your tongue. Next, the lunch pack, a small tin labeled meat. This could be pork loaf, chicken, or beef, depending on the batch. It smells vaguely like canned happiness and vaguely like regret. You tear open a packet of emergency chocolate, which tastes like a cross between a wax candle and an attempt at sweetness gone wrong. The supper pack completes the day with another dose of canned meat, more biscuits, and a fruity candy bar. Soldiers often hoarded these candy bars like gold, trading them for cigarettes or favors. There was a certain joy in that small sugar hit, a reminder that life outside the jungle existed. Interestingly, the K ration was initially designed for airborne troops who needed something light and compact for quick strikes behind enemy lines. But it quickly became standard issue for many frontline soldiers, especially those in mobile operations. Historians still debate whether the K ration's focus on portability sacrificed too much on nutrition and taste. Some soldiers reported fatigue and vitamin deficiencies when subsisting on K rations alone for extended periods. Yet in the chaos of war, convenience often trumped culinary quality. One quirky tidbit, the chewing gum included in K rations was more than just a breath freshener. Soldiers believed it helped keep their jaws strong and combat boredom. Some even chewed gum while sneaking through enemy lines, thinking it muffled their footsteps. Not exactly stealthy, but hey, it helped morale. The packaging was another story. Cardboard boxes meant the K rations weren't as durable as canned goods. Moisture, humidity, and rough handling could easily turn the biscuits into crumbs and the powders into clumps. Still, soldiers learned to adapt. Some would crush the biscuits into crumbs and mix them with water to make a kind of porridge. Others ate everything cold because firewood was scarce or too risky. Despite all this, the K ration became an iconic symbol of the soldier's daily grind. It wasn't gourmet, it wasn't home cooking, but it was reliable, portable, and, most importantly, edible enough to keep you moving forward. And if you ever wondered about the name, K doesn't stand for anything in particular. Some say it came from the word key from Dr. Keyes. Others guess it was just a military code. Whatever the origin, the K ration left an indelible mark on wartime history. So, as you sit on a damp log, chewing your last bit of gum and staring into the endless green, you realize that food in war isn't about pleasure, it's about survival. And sometimes that means learning to love powdered eggs and chocolate that tastes like a candle. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as you trudge along a dusty road, your mouth parched and your pack feeling heavier by the minute. You reach for your canteen and take a long, grateful sip of water. Hydration is crucial, but what about flavor? Enter the world of wartime beverages, an often overlooked part of a soldier's daily ration that kept spirits up, if not exactly delighted taste buds. One staple was the powdered coffee packet. Unlike the rich brew you might savor at home, this was instant coffee at its most basic. Bitter, watery, and often laced with grit from the coarse powder that never fully dissolved. Yet, soldiers swore by it, considering that morning cup a ritual that signaled a moment of normalcy amid the madness. To make it, you'd pour the coffee powder into a cup, add hot water if you could manage a fire, or cold water if not, and stir, often hastily, as artillery rumbled nearby. The smell alone could lift your mood, even if the taste left much to be desired. Curiously, the military also issued lemonade powder and grape drink powder packets to supplement hydration and add a splash of variety. Mix them with water and you'd get a faintly sweet, artificially flavored beverage that reminded you of childhood summers, though with a chemical edge. It wasn't gourmet, but it was something. Different from plain water, and that made a difference. Here's an odd fact. In the Pacific Theater, soldiers sometimes mixed their powdered drinks with local fruits or berries, trying to coax out a more palatable flavor from their basic rations. This experimentation wasn't officially encouraged, but spoke to soldiers' endless ingenuity when it came to food. Historians still debate how much these powdered drinks affected morale. Some argue they were a small but vital comfort, helping soldiers maintain a sense of routine. Others say the impact was negligible, overshadowed by the harsh realities of combat and hunger. Beyond drinks, there were also electrolyte powders designed to replenish salts lost through sweat, a primitive version of today's sports drinks. These were especially important in tropical environments where heat exhaustion was a constant threat. And speaking of hydration, the design of canteens evolved during the war. Early models were simple metal flasks, prone to heating up in the sun or freezing in cold weather. Later versions included insulated covers, sometimes lined with wool or felt, to keep water cool or prevent freezing. Small details like this made a big difference in the daily grind. One quirky tale comes from soldiers stationed in Europe, who reportedly tried mixing coffee with condensed milk from their rations, creating a makeshift café au lait that was both energizing and strangely comforting. Not quite the Parisian café experience, but it worked. As you finish your makeshift drink and wipe your mouth, you realize that in war, it's not just about the main meal, but the small rituals, the sip of coffee, the taste of a sugary drink, that keep you connected to the world you left behind. So next time you're tempted to complain about instant coffee, remember the soldiers who drank theirs while dodging bullets, finding brief moments of calm in a cup. The morning sun peeks through the dusty canopy, casting mottled shadows over your camp. You stretch stiff limbs, your pack feeling heavier today. It's time for something a little different, the infamous C-ration bread. Now, you might be thinking, bread in a war zone? That sounds promising. Hold that thought. This bread isn't like the warm, crusty loaf your grandmother pulls from the oven. No, this is canned bread, a dense, brick-like slab sealed tight inside a metal can. The idea was to provide soldiers with a stable, portable source of carbs that wouldn't spoil. And it didn't spoil, all right. In fact, it was famously indestructible. You pop open the can with your trusty P38 opener, and the smell hits you first. Faintly sweet, oddly metallic, and just a little bit like a forgotten gym sock. You slice off a chunk, noting how it barely crumbles. It's dense and heavy, more like a rock than bread. Soldiers quickly learned the tricks to eating it. Some preferred to toast it over a fire, which softened the texture and brought out a faint sweetness that could almost be called pleasant. Others spread the ubiquitous orange cheese paste over it, combining two wartime staples into a single questionable meal. Here's a fun tidbit. Some soldiers even used canned bread as a kind of edible weapon. The story goes that one GI tossed a slab of it at an enemy soldier, and it was enough to stun him momentarily. Whether true or not, it's easy to see how something that hard and heavy could double as a thrown object in a pinch. The canned bread was part of the C-ration's attempt to mimic home comforts. Unfortunately, while it lasted well and packed calories, its culinary appeal was basically zero. It was nicknamed brick bread, loaf of doom, and various other less polite monikers. Historians still debate whether including bread in a can was a stroke of genius or a logistical mistake. On the one hand, it provided an essential carbohydrate source that could withstand harsh conditions. On the other, its texture and taste made it a running joke among troops, testing their patience and creativity in equal measure. Interestingly, canned bread had a shelf life of several years, which meant soldiers could still be eating the same loaf long after the war ended. Rumor has it some tins ended up in family pantries decades later, relics of a war long past. Despite all this, canned bread was a vital part of the soldier's diet, filling the stomach and providing some semblance of normalcy amid the chaos. You chew slowly, remembering the strange mix of comfort and despair that each bite carried. And as you sit in the fading daylight, nibbling on this metallic loaf, you can't help but wonder if anyone, anywhere, ever enjoyed canned bread without irony. The battlefield grows quiet as night settles in, but your hunger doesn't. You reach into your pack for something a little different, the famed D-ration bar. It's the secret weapon of wartime snacking, designed not to delight your taste buds, but to fuel your body when nothing else is around. This bar isn't chocolate in the usual sense. Instead, it's a dense, dark slab packed with calories and designed to resist melting in even the hottest conditions. The Army called it the emergency ration, and emergency it truly was. You bite into it, and your teeth protest. It's like chewing on a block of compressed, slightly burnt shoe leather. But the calories hit your bloodstream fast, and that's what counts. What's wild is that these bars were designed to last years without spoiling, making them perfect for paratroopers, pilots, and anyone who might be stranded behind enemy lines. They had a deliberately bitter taste, so soldiers wouldn't eat them casually or waste precious calories on unnecessary snacking. There's a funny soldier anecdote about these bars. One guy reportedly used his D-ration as a makeshift hammer when his rifle jammed. Not exactly the intended use, but desperate times call for desperate measures. You might wonder what was in this thing. The ingredients list is a no-nonsense mix of sugar, oat flour, cocoa, and caffeine. Yes, caffeine, giving you a little kick when your body is running on empty. The caffeine was a secret weapon, a subtle nudge to keep you alert when the world felt like it was closing in. Historians still argue whether the D-ration was more of a psychological boost than an actual food item. Some say its main purpose was to keep soldiers feeling like they had a lifeline in the form of a sweet treat, even if it wasn't really sweet at all. While the D-ration wasn't a meal replacement, it was a crucial supplement. Pilots flying long missions, isolated squads cut off from supply lines, and soldiers in harsh conditions relied on these bars when nothing else was available. Another curious fact, the D-ration bars came wrapped in wax paper with colorful designs, sometimes patriotic slogans or simple instructions meant to boost morale. But the design was so bland and the taste so off-putting that soldiers usually just tore off the wrapper and got on with it. You pop another bite into your mouth, the taste lingering like a memory of hard days and longer nights. You remind yourself that this isn't about pleasure. It's about keeping your legs moving, your mind sharp, and your will to survive alive. The D-ration may be one of the war's strangest culinary inventions, a piece of edible engineering designed to keep you alive even when your stomach is begging for mercy. And as you tuck the last crumb away, you wonder what home-cooked meals you'll crave when this nightmare ends. You're now crouched in a foxhole, rain drizzling down your neck, and hunger gnaws at you more insistently than the mosquitoes. The rations you've been eating are decent enough to keep you going, but there's one particular item you've been dying to try: the humble Spam can. Yes, Spam, the canned mystery meat that somehow became a legend of World War II. Spam's story is almost as fascinating as its flavor. Originally developed in the 1930s by Hormel Foods, it was designed to be a versatile, shelf-stable meat product that could be easily transported and stored. When war broke out, Spam became a staple for American and Allied troops alike. You crack open the can, the unmistakable aroma wafting up, part salty, part meaty, and part, what exactly am I eating? You slice off a piece and toss it onto a makeshift pan over a small fire. The sizzling sound is oddly comforting, and the aroma deepens as it crisps up. It's surprisingly tasty when cooked this way, almost like bacon's distant cousin. Soldiers loved Spam because it was filling, easy to prepare, and could be eaten hot or cold. It was also a morale booster, something familiar in a foreign land. But let's be honest, Spam has never had the best reputation as a gourmet treat. Jokes flew about it being special army loaf or mystery meat surprise, but it kept millions fed. Here's a quirky tidbit. In the Pacific Islands, Spam became so popular with locals and soldiers alike that it's still a beloved staple today, decades after the war. There's even a Spam museum in Hawaii, and Spam musubi, Spam wrapped in rice and seaweed, is a local delicacy. Historians still argue why Spam was so wildly successful compared to other canned meats. Some credit its long shelf life and ease of transport. Others point to the emotional comfort it provided in wartime conditions. Regardless, it was a key player in the logistics of feeding millions. You might wonder about its ingredients. It's a mix of pork shoulder, ham, salt, sugar, and preservatives. That simple formula ensured it stayed edible for years, a necessity in the unpredictable supply chains of war. And there's a strange bit of trivia. During the war, Spam was often used as barter currency among troops and civilians, showing its value extended beyond mere sustenance. So, as you munch on your sizzling slice, you appreciate that in war, food isn't just about flavor. It's about comfort, convenience, and sometimes a little piece of home. The evening air cools, and you find yourself sprawled near a campfire, tired but alert. As you rummage through your pack, you spot something that instantly brings a glimmer of joy: a tin of cheese spread. It might not sound like much, but this little can packed a surprising punch in the daily ration game. The cheese spread was a wartime innovation, soft, processed, and designed to be a stable source of fat and protein. Unlike the real cheese you might savor back home, this version came in a metal can, with a texture that hovered somewhere between creamy and plasticky. It was salty, tangy, and oddly comforting in its own processed way. You spread it thick on a piece of canned bread or a cracker from your ration box. The contrast of textures, soft cheese and hard biscuit, made for a surprisingly decent snack, if you could get past the odd flavor. Interestingly, the cheese spread was fortified with vitamins, aiming to help prevent nutritional deficiencies common in prolonged field deployments. It was part of a broader push to ensure that soldiers didn't just survive, but stayed functional and healthy. A quirky note: soldiers sometimes use the cheese spread as an ingredient in improvised recipes, mixing it with canned meats or even dried vegetables to create something resembling a stew. Not exactly gourmet, but it kept the palate from becoming completely numb. Historians still argue about the nutritional value versus the psychological comfort provided by such processed foods. Was the cheese spread more important for morale or actual sustenance? The answer is probably both. Packaging was practical but uninspiring, simple tins with straightforward labeling. Soldiers quickly became experts at opening these cans quietly and efficiently, often using their trusty P38 can openers. Another fun fact: the cheese spread was sometimes traded or shared between troops from different countries, becoming a kind of common currency in multinational units. It was a small reminder that despite the vast scale of the conflict, camaraderie and shared experiences thrived. As you nibble on your cheese and bread, you realize that these small comforts, processed, unappealing, yet oddly satisfying, were vital to maintaining a soldier's spirit. And as the fire crackles softly beside you, you know that no matter how far from home you are, these little tastes of normalcy keep you grounded, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. The night is quiet now, and you lie back against a cold rock, the distant stars peeking through the canopy above. Your stomach rumbles softly, but there's one more rations mystery to unpack: the often forgotten vitamin pills issued alongside your food supplies. These pills weren't exactly a meal, but they played a subtle, vital role in keeping you going. Packed with vitamin C and other essential nutrients, they were designed to prevent scurvy and other deficiency diseases that could devastate troops in prolonged campaigns. You swallow a small tablet, gritty but manageable, and think about how far nutrition science had come by the 1940s. After years of learning from previous conflicts, military planners understood that feeding soldiers wasn't just about calories, it was about health and endurance. But here's a quirky side note: the pills sometimes had a chalky taste, leading soldiers to jokingly call them horse pills or bitter little lifesavers. Some even reported mild stomach discomfort, but the alternative, nutritional deficiency, was far worse. Historians still debate how effective these supplements truly were in the field. Some argue that the pills made a measurable difference in reducing disease rates, while others think their impact was limited by poor compliance and logistical challenges. Interestingly, the introduction of vitamin supplements during World War II marked a turning point in military medicine, influencing post-war civilian health trends and the development of dietary guidelines. You also recall that vitamin pills were sometimes included in the emergency rations issued to airmen who might be stranded for days or weeks. Their role was to help sustain health when fresh food was impossible to obtain. As you settle into the quiet night, the idea that these tiny pills carried the promise of continued strength and survival feels oddly comforting. It's a reminder that even the smallest details, like a gritty tablet, can hold the line between life and death. And as your eyes close, you drift off with a sense of gratitude for the hidden heroes of the ration pack, working silently to keep you going through the darkest hours. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the field as you settle into camp for the night. The smell of damp earth and smoke hangs in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of your evening meal. Tonight, it's the K ration, a compact, lightweight emergency meal designed for soldiers on the move when the full C ration wasn't practical. The K ration was introduced by the U.S. Army in 1942 as a solution for paratroopers and other mobile troops who needed a quick, portable source of calories without the bulk of canned goods. It consisted of 3 small packages: breakfast, dinner, and supper, each containing biscuits, meat or cheese, candy, and sometimes a powdered drink mix. You tear open the dinner pack and find a biscuit that's surprisingly crumbly, a small tin of meat, usually pork or beef loaf, a piece of candy, and a chocolate bar. The meat is salty, the biscuit a bit dry, but together they make a passable meal when fresh food is nowhere in sight. What's fascinating is that the K ration was designed with psychological factors in mind. The inclusion of sweets wasn't just for calories, it was to boost morale and provide small comforts amid hardship. The candy bars and chewing gum were morale boosters, little treats that reminded you life might still hold some sweetness. However, K rations earned a reputation for being dull and repetitive. Soldiers nicknamed them combat starvation rations, or K-rats, complaining about their blandness and lack of variety. Some even joked that the meatloaf was so processed it could be used as a building material. A quirky anecdote, some soldiers got creative by combining K-ration components with whatever they could forage, adding local herbs or cooking the contents over an open fire to improve flavor. This kind of culinary improvisation was a small rebellion against the monotony of military meals. Historians still argue whether the K-ration's convenience outweighed its nutritional shortcomings. While it provided essential calories, critics say it wasn't designed for long-term use, and reliance on it sometimes led to malnutrition or digestive issues. Despite that, the K-ration's compact design was a game-changer for mobility and rapid deployment. It allowed soldiers to carry several days' worth of food in a small pack, supporting missions deep behind enemy lines. As you finish your makeshift meal and stow the wrappers, you can't help but admire the ingenuity behind this ration system. It wasn't gourmet, but it was survival food, engineered for efficiency, endurance, and a little psychological comfort. The K-ration is a reminder that in war, even small comforts, like a piece of chocolate or a sticky biscuit, can mean the difference between hope and despair. The dawn breaks again, and you wake to a faint rumble in the distance, artillery fire mixing with the calls of distant birds. You reach into your pack and find a small packet labeled cereal beverage, a curious item that soldiers often overlooked but secretly appreciated. This powdered mix was designed as a hot drink alternative to coffee, particularly for those who couldn't stomach the bitter instant stuff anymore. Made from roasted barley and wheat, it was a caffeine-free way to get some warmth and comfort, especially during cold, damp mornings. You stir the powder into hot water, and the smell is nutty and earthy, a bit like a gentle campfire. The taste? Surprisingly soothing, with a mild bitterness that somehow manages to be pleasant after days of harsh rations. Some soldiers claimed it reminded them of malted milkshakes from childhood, though with none of the sweetness. This beverage was more than just a morale booster. It was also a source of carbohydrates, helping sustain energy levels during long marches or extended combat. Its low caffeine content made it a good choice for late shifts when soldiers needed calm alertness rather than jitters. One quirky piece of trivia: in some units, the cereal beverage became a secret weapon for the night watch. Soldiers would sneak quiet sips to stay alert without disturbing their comrades with the strong smell of coffee. It was almost like a covert energy source, understated but effective. Historians still debate the impact of these alternative beverages on troop morale. Were they a crucial psychological boost or just a placebo? What's clear is that they provided variety, a rare and treasured thing amid the monotony of military meals. Packaging was simple, lightweight paper packets that could be easily tucked into pockets or packs. The drink could be prepared anywhere, which made it especially useful for troops on the move or in remote outposts. Interestingly, after the war, versions of this cereal beverage influenced commercial products, contributing to the rise of instant malted drinks popular in the 1950s and beyond. So, in a way, your humble wartime brew had a legacy far beyond the battlefield. As you sip this warm drink and watch the sun climb higher, you feel a quiet connection to the countless soldiers who found small moments of peace in similar cups. It's these little rituals, simple, unremarkable to most, that hold the fabric of wartime life together. And as your energy slowly returns, you prepare for the day ahead, knowing that every bite, every sip, carries you a little further from fear and a little closer to hope. The chill of dawn seeps into your bones as you prepare to move out. But before you go, you check your pack for one last crucial item: the trail mix, or hardtack, soldiers sometimes carried as a supplement to their standard rations. This snack wasn't officially issued in all units, but it played an important role in many soldiers' survival stories. Hardtack was a simple, dense biscuit made from flour, water, and salt, basically the original soldier's cracker. It was baked hard enough to last months or years without spoiling, which made it a staple in earlier conflicts like the Civil War and World War I. During World War II, it was mostly replaced by more modern rations, but some troops still carried or traded for it, especially in remote locations. Trail mix, on the other hand, was an unofficial but beloved mix of nuts, dried fruits, and sometimes chocolate or candy pieces. Soldiers often mixed their own or traded for it when they could. It provided quick energy, essential fats, and a welcome burst of flavor. Here's a quirky fact. Some units would customize their trail mixes by adding whatever local nuts or fruits they could forage, making each batch a little different. It became a small connection to the environment, a taste of home or adventure, depending on how you looked at it. Historians still debate the nutritional importance of these snacks versus official rations. While they provided extra calories and variety, their informal nature means they're less documented in official records, leaving their exact role somewhat mysterious. Another odd story is how hardtack was used in extreme situations, not just as food, but as a tool. In some tales, soldiers soaked it in water to soften it for eating, while others reportedly used pieces to patch gear, or even as kindling in fires. The dual existence of official and unofficial snacks highlights how soldiers adapted to their needs and environments. While armies tried to control what went into a soldier's pack, the reality on the ground was always a bit messier and more creative. As you munch on a handful of trail mix, savoring the mix of sweet and salty, you realize that these small tastes and textures are more than just calories. They're moments of joy and normalcy amid the chaos. Packing up your gear, you tuck away the last crumbs, ready to move forward with a little extra fuel and a small smile. The sun hangs low as you settle in for the night, the distant sounds of the day fading into a gentle quiet. As you lay down, the day's meals and drinks swirl through your mind, a patchwork of flavors and textures that sustained you through chaos. But before you drift fully into sleep, there's one last topic to cover: the subtle art of eating in war zones and how food shaped not just your body, but your experience. Eating as a soldier wasn't just about nutrition. It was about routine, survival, and even connection. Amid the noise and danger, sharing a meal or a snack became a rare moment of camaraderie. The way soldiers passed around cans, split rations, or traded sweets showed a small but profound humanity. You might recall the creative meals soldiers whipped up by combining different ration components, mixing canned meats with powdered drinks, or scavenging local ingredients to add flavor and variety. These culinary improvisations were as much about mental escape as they were about physical nourishment. Interestingly, the rituals around eating also varied by theater and culture. Soldiers in Europe might have access to different local foods than those in the Pacific, influencing how they adapted their rations. These differences are a rich area of study, and historians still debate how local food availability affected soldiers' health and morale. Here's a quirky anecdote. Some soldiers kept small personal stashes of candy or gum hidden away, a secret luxury to be savored slowly. These little treasures helped break the monotony and offered comfort in the darkest moments. The food's impact extended beyond the individual to the entire military effort. Supply chains, ration design, and nutrition research were critical logistical pillars.
In fact, the war spurred advances in food preservation, packaging, and military dietetics, developments that influenced post-war civilian food industries. As you close your eyes, you realize that the story of wartime eating is a story of resilience, ingenuity, and the small comforts that make survival possible. Food in war is never just about calories. It's about holding on to something familiar, something human. So, as the night deepens and your breathing slows, imagine yourself sitting by a quiet fire, sharing a simple meal with comrades, feeling the warmth of connection amid the cold shadows of war.
As you sink deeper into your pillow, let your thoughts slow and soften, like the fading glow of a campfire at night. Imagine the quiet rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, the distant murmur of a night watch, and the steady rhythm of your own breathing, calm and even. The taste of hard biscuits, salty spam, and warm cereal drink fades gently from your senses, replaced by the softness of rest. War's hunger was relentless, but so was the human spirit, the spark that found comfort in even the smallest morsels. Every bite, every sip carried you through uncertainty and fear, grounding you with a tiny thread of normalcy. Now those threads weave into a quiet tapestry of peace, gently wrapping around you. Let your mind drift on this slow, steady current. There's no need to rush. The past's harsh flavors dissolve, leaving only the warmth of survival and the hope of dawn. Your body relaxes, muscles unclench, and your thoughts grow hazy, safe here for now. So breathe deeply, softly, and let your eyelids grow heavy. The world fades, and all that remains is the steady pulse of night's calm embrace. Tomorrow will bring its challenges, but tonight you rest, held in the quiet comfort of a meal well taken, a journey nearly done. Sweet dreams, friend. Sweet dreams.